Chapter 6 New Questions and Ideas. The Wise Beggar. Here is a dialogue based on a story from one of the most famous Upanishads, the Chandogya Upanishad. Shaunaka and Abhipratharan were two sages who worshipped the universal soul. Once, as they sat down to eat, a beggar came and asked for some food. "We cannot spare anything for you," Shaunaka said. "Learned sirs, whom do you worship?" the beggar asked. "The universal soul," Abhipratharan replied. "Ah, it means that you know that the universal soul fills the entire world." Yes, we know that." The sages nodded. "If the universal soul fills the whole world, it fills me too. Who am I but a part of the world?" the beggar asked. "You speak the truth, O young Brahmin." "Then, O sages, by not giving me food, you are actually denying food to the universal soul." The sages realized the truth of what the beggar said and shared their food with him. How did the beggar convince the sages to share their food with him? Beggar convinced both sages that denying him is to deny the universal soul to whom they worshipped. After listening to him, they realized their mistake and shared food with him. Panini the Grammarian. This was also the time when other scholars were at work. One of the most famous was Panini, who prepared a grammar for Sanskrit. He arranged the vowels and the consonants in a special order and then used these to create formulae like those found in algebra. He used these to write down the rules of the language in short formulae, around 3,000 of them. Jainism. The last and 24th Tirthankara of the Jainas, Vardhaman Mahavira, also spread his message around this time, that is, 2500 years ago. He was a Kshatriya prince of the Lichavis, a group that was part of the Vajji Sangha, about which you read in chapter 5. At the age of 30, he left home and went to live in a forest. For 12 years, he led a hard and lonely life, at the end of which he attained enlightenment. He taught a simple doctrine: men and women who wish to know the truth must leave their homes. They must follow very strictly the rules of ahimsa, which means not hurting or killing living beings. All beings, said Mahavira, long to live. To all things, life is dear. Ordinary people could understand the teachings of Mahavira and his followers because they used Prakrit. There were several forms of Prakrit used in different parts of the country and named after the regions in which they were used. For example, the Prakrit spoken in Magad was known as Magadhi. Followers of Mahavira, who were known as Jainas, had to lead very simple lives, begging for food. They had to be absolutely honest and were especially asked not to steal. Also, they had to observe celibacy, and men had to give up everything, including their clothes. Jainism. It was very difficult for most men and women to follow these strict rules. Nevertheless, thousands left their homes to learn and teach this new way of life. Many more remained behind and supported those who became monks and nuns, providing them with food. Jainism was supported mainly by traders, farmers who had to kill insects to protect their crops found it more difficult to follow the rules. Over hundreds of years, Jainism spread to different parts of North India and to Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. The teachings of Mahavira and his followers were transmitted orally for several centuries. They were written down in the form in which they are presently available at a place called Vallabhi in Gujarat about 1500 years ago. See Map 7, page 105. The Sangha. Both the Mahavira and Buddha felt that only those who left their homes could gain true knowledge. They arranged for them to stay together in the Sangha, an association of those who left their homes. The rules made for the Buddhist Sangha were written down in a book called the Vinay Pitak. From this, we know that there were separate branches for men and women. All men could join the Sangha. However, children had to take the permission of their parents, and slaves that of their masters. Those who worked for the king had to take his permission, and debtors that of creditors. Women had to take their husband's permission. Men and women who joined the Sangha led simple lives. They meditated for most of the time and went to cities and villages to beg for food during fixed hours. That is why they were known as bhikkhus, the Prakrit word for renouncer, beggar, and bhikkhunis. They taught others and helped one another. They also held meetings to settle any quarrels that took place within the Sangha. Those who joined the Sangha included Brahmins, Kshatriyas, merchants, laborers, barbers, courtesans, and slaves. Many of them wrote down the teachings of the Buddha. Some of them also composed beautiful poems describing their life in the Sangha. List at least two ways in which the Sangha described in this lesson was different from the one mentioned in chapter 5. Were there any similarities, differences? First, both the Mahavir and Buddha felt that only those who left their homes could gain true knowledge. They arranged for them to stay together in the Sangha. Sangha is the association of those who left their homes. Second, there were many rulers, men and women, who joined the Sangha led simple lives. Similarities: women, slaves, and children, kamkaras, had to take permission to join Sangha. They could not participate in Sangha without permission of their husbands, masters, parents. The word Jaina comes from the term Jina, meaning conqueror. Why do you think the term Jina was used for Mahavira and Bhikkhunis? This term was used for Mahavira because at the age of 42 he attained the highest spiritual knowledge. Therefore, he is called the Jina or conqueror of self. Monasteries. To begin with, both Jain and Buddhist monks went from place to place throughout the year teaching people. The only time they stayed in one place was during the rainy season, when it was very difficult to travel. Then their supporters built temporary shelters for them in gardens, or they lived in natural caves in hilly areas. As time went on, many supporters of the monks and nuns, and they themselves, felt the need for more permanent shelters, and so monasteries were built. These are known as viharas. The earliest viharas were made of wood and then of brick. Some were even in caves that were dug out in hills, especially in western India. A Buddhist text tells us, just as the waters of rivers lose their names and separateness when they flow into the mighty ocean, so are varna and ranks and family forgotten when the followers of the Buddha join the order of monks. Very often, the land on which the vihara was built was donated by a rich merchant or a landowner or the king. The local people came with gifts of food, clothing, and medicines for the monks and nuns. In return, they taught the people. Over the centuries, Buddhism spread to many parts of the subcontinent and beyond. You will learn more about this in Chapter 9, the system of ashramas. Around the time when Jainism and Buddhism were becoming popular, Brahmins developed the system of ashramas. Here, the word ashrama does not mean a place where the people live and meditate. It is used instead for a stage of life. 4 ashramas were recognized: Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanprastha, and Sannyasa. Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya men were expected to lead simple lives and study the Vedas during the early years of their life, Brahmacharya. Then they had to marry and live as householders, Grihastha. Then they had to live in the forest and meditate, Vanprastha. Finally, they had to give up everything and become sannyasin. The system of ashramas allowed men to spend some part of their lives in meditation. Generally, women were not allowed to study the Vedas, and they had to follow the ashramas chosen by their husbands. In what way was the system of ashramas different from life in the Sangha? The system of ashramas were the different stages of life men had to live. It allowed men to spend some part of their lives in meditation. Women were not allowed to read Vedas, and they were bound to follow the ashramas chosen by their husbands. Sangha was an association joined by both men and women. What are the varnas mentioned here? The varnas mentioned here are Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Were all 4 varnas allowed to participate in the system of ashramas? No, Shudras were not allowed to participate in the system of ashramas. Elsewhere, find Iran in your atlas. Zoroaster was an Iranian prophet. His teachings are contained in a book called the Avesta. The language of the Avesta and the practices described in it are very similar to those of the Vedas. The basic teachings of Zoroaster are contained in the maxim, good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Here is a verse from the Zend Avesta. Lord, grant strength and the rule of truth and good thinking. by means of which one shall create peace and tranquility. For more than 1,000 years, Zoroastrianism was a major religion in Iran. Later, some Zoroastrians migrated from Iran and settled down in the coastal town of Gujarat and Maharashtra. They were the ancestors of today's Parsi.